Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into one of the most pivotal conflicts in all of human history, the First World War. It's a huge question, right? This isn't just the story of a war. It's the story of a catastrophic chain reaction, a fire fueled by decades of pressure building up across an entire continent. Okay, let's get into it. To really get what happened, you've got to rewind the clock way before 1914 to a Europe that was basically a ticking time bomb. And this cartoon from 1890, it just nails the feeling at the time. There's a new, reckless leader, and he's upsetting a very, very delicate balance. So you had these three massive pressures pushing Europe right to the edge of a cliff. You've got the rise of a new superpower, a kind of survival of the fittest mentality sweeping the globe, and this tangled, messy web of secret alliances that basically shackled nations together. First up, right in the heart of Europe, a brand new superpower just appeared. After Germany unified in 1871, its population and its economy absolutely exploded. I mean, get this, by 1914, its steel output was greater than Britain, France, and Russia combined. And its army? One of the most advanced in the world. This created what everyone called the German question. What was this new giant going to do? At the exact same time, you've got this really brutal idea taking hold. A British prime minister actually said the world was divided into living and dying powers. The thinking was, to be a great nation, you had to have a great empire. This fueled this insane competitive scramble for colonies, because expansion wasn't just about pride. It was seen as the only way to survive. So in steps Germany's ambitious new leader, Kaiser Wilhelm II, and he just flips the script entirely. He ditches the cautious diplomacy of the past for this aggressive new strategy he called Weltpolitik, or world policy. And what was the goal? To build a massive navy and a global empire that could go toe-to-toe with Britain. This confrontational style immediately put all the other major powers on high alert. So what happens when everyone gets nervous? They pick sides. Europe split right down the middle into two armed camps. On one side, you had the Triple Alliance, Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. On the other, the Triple Entente, Britain, France, and Russia. And these weren't just friendly clubs, they were bound by treaties that meant an attack on one could trigger a war for all of them. Okay, so the stage is set. The alliances are locked in, the armies are ready to go, and the rivalries are simmering. The whole continent is a powder keg. All it needed was a single spark. And that spark came from the Balkans, which was this hotbed of nationalist movements, with people desperate for independence from the old crumbling empires. In the city of Sarajevo, a young Bosnian Serb nationalist named Gavrilo Princip shoots and kills the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, Archduke Franz Ferdinand. And this is where it all goes off the rails, just unbelievably fast. That one gunshot pulled everyone in like a vortex. Austria-Hungary declares war on Serbia. That move triggers Russia to get its army ready to back up Serbia. In response, Germany declares war on Russia. Just like that, those tripwire alliances dragged the continent into this unstoppable domino effect. Within a week, all of Europe's great powers were at war. But here's the thing. This wasn't going to be a traditional war with cavalry charges and quick victories. No, this was something totally new, an industrial-scale conflict that would eat entire empires and change society in ways nobody could have possibly imagined. Yeah, that whole "the boys will be home by Christmas" idea, it died almost instantly. On the Western Front, the fighting just bogged down into this horrific, grinding war of attrition. For 4 years, millions of men lived and died in this hellscape of mud, barbed wire, and trenches, all for a few bloody yards of land. And let's be crystal clear, this was not some little European squabble. This was a world war, in every sense of the word. The Ottoman Empire jumped in, opening up fronts in the Middle East. European powers brought in soldiers from their colonies all across Africa and Asia. Japan joined the fight in the Pacific, and eventually the United States was pulled across the Atlantic and into the fight. For the Ottoman Empire, the war was absolutely devastating. You know, they'd been called the sick man of Europe for a long time, and they were pretty exhausted and unprepared for this. But even so, their forces handed the Allies some stunning defeats, like at Gallipoli. The cost, though, it was staggering. Nearly 800,000 of their soldiers died, not just from combat, but from disease, too. And this is such a crucial point. The war was a total social effort. It reached into every single home, and it forever changed the role of women in society. With millions of men fighting, women stepped up and filled the factories, the fields, and the offices. They were switchboard operators near the front lines. They drove ambulances. They were nurses. They weren't just helping. They were absolutely critical. The war effort would have literally collapsed without them. So, after 4 long, bloody years and millions dead, it's finally over. The guns fall silent. But the peace treaty that followed, well, it was so flawed, so full of anger and competing goals, that it basically just set the timer for the next World War. At the Paris Peace Conference, you had 2 totally different worlds colliding. On one hand, there was the American president, Woodrow Wilson, with his idealistic 14 points. He was calling for a peace without victory. But on the other side, the European allies, especially France. They were exhausted, they were angry, and they wanted one thing: payback. The treaty they wrote, the Treaty of Versailles, wasn't about idealism. It was about punishment. And this was the real knife twist. Article 231, the infamous war guilt clause. It legally forced Germany to accept 100% of the blame for starting the war and for all the damage it caused. This wasn't just about money. For Germans, it was a deep national humiliation, and it fueled a resentment that would fester for years. And people knew it was a bad idea at the time. Even some of the victors could see it. The top Allied commander, Marshal Foch of France, looked at the treaty and said something that turned out to be chillingly accurate. This is not peace. It is an armistice for 20 years. Now, for decades, the story we've heard is that this was a Carthaginian peace, right? A brutal treaty designed to completely obliterate Germany. But is it that simple? While the reparations bill was huge, some historians now argue it wasn't actually an impossible burden to pay. They point out that the treaty didn't really destroy Germany's potential to become a powerhouse again. So maybe the real problem was this weird paradox. The treaty was a flawed compromise. It was harsh enough to make Germany furious, but it was too weak to actually be enforced. It had no teeth. And the killer blow? The U.S. Senate basically said nope, refused to ratify it, and America never even joined the new League of Nations. The whole idea of collective security was crippled from day one. So, the war to end all wars. Or was it really just a 20-year timeout? All that unresolved anger, the economic chaos, and that fatally flawed peace treaty of 1919, it created the perfect storm for a second, even more terrifying global conflict. Just as Marshal Foch had predicted, it wasn't a peace, it was an armistice that lasted almost exactly 20 years.